Trigger warning. This story contains descriptions of abuse and trauma. Viewer discretion is advised. If you found this story powerful and want to hear more true crime stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to avoid missing any new videos. Your support helps raise awareness and spreads these important stories. Thank you for watching, and remember, every story counts. Today, we're exploring a tragic story of neglect, abandonment, and heartbreaking loss. The story of 16-month-old Jailyn Candelario. Jailyn's life was cut short after her mother, Kristel Candelario, left her alone for 10 days in their Cleveland home. This decision to leave her daughter led to a shocking chain of events, culminating in one of the most emotional court cases in recent memory. In June 2023, Kristel Candelario left her home, embarking on a vacation that took her to Puerto Rico and Detroit. She left her 16-month-old daughter, Jailyn, alone and unattended for 10 days in her playpen. This horrifying neglect would lead to an outcome no one should ever witness. When Kristel left, she made no arrangements for Jailyn's care. She left Jailyn alone in her playpen, with only a small amount of food and milk, far from what would have been necessary to keep her nourished and hydrated for the 10 days she was gone. When Kristel Candelario finally returned home after 10 days, the first thing she did wasn't to check on her daughter's well-being or call the police. Instead, she took her time, seemingly unfazed by the situation. As she entered the room, she found Jailyn in a state of extreme distress. The baby, who had been left alone for days, was dirty, covered in her own waste. Jailyn's tiny hands were caked with feces, a clear sign of the lack of care and neglect she had been subjected to in her mother's absence. Rather than immediately seek help, Kristel took the time to change Jailyn's diaper. The baby's nails were caked with feces, a heartbreaking detail that highlighted the extent of her suffering. Kristel did not call for emergency help. She didn't immediately seek medical attention. When authorities arrived at the scene where Jailyn Candelario was found, they noted that the toddler had been extremely dehydrated. This, along with the state in which the child was discovered, led to the assumption that she had been without food and water for a significant period. Jailyn was found in a pack-and-play, surrounded by soiled blankets, and her diaper was saturated with both urine and feces. Tragically, Jailyn was already unresponsive when her mother, Kristel Candelario, returned from her trip and found her on June 16, 2023. First responders declared Jailyn dead at the scene. The exact time of Jailyn's death has not been clearly established, but her condition and the circumstances pointed to her suffering for the entire duration of the 10 days that her mother was away. Judge Sheehan went on, calling this case the ultimate act of betrayal. He described Jailyn's suffering as the most gruesome death imaginable, highlighting that her mother chose personal enjoyment over her child's life. He spoke directly to Kristel, saying, "Miss Candelario, you know the responsibility of parenthood. You simply chose not to be here because you wanted to have fun. What followed was absolute depravity." In February 2024, Kristel Candelario pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and child endangering. On March 18, 2024, Judge Brendan J. Sheehan sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing, he stated firmly, "As a court, I have to remember Jailyn, where you did not." He drew a stark parallel between Jailyn's confinement and her mother's prison sentence, saying, "Just as you didn't let Jailyn out of her confinement until she died, so too you should spend the rest of your life in a cell without freedom. The only difference will be that prison will at least feed you and give you liquids that you denied her." During the sentencing, Kristel spoke briefly, expressing remorse. "There's so much pain that I have in regards to the loss of my baby, Jailyn," she said. "Every day, I ask forgiveness from God and from my daughter." She explained that she suffered from emotional health issues, a plea for understanding that was ultimately rejected by the court. Her mother also spoke, pleading for leniency by mentioning Kristel's upbringing and struggles. But for the court and the community, the betrayal of Jailyn's trust was simply too severe to overlook. Cleveland police officers who worked on the case expressed their own heartbreak, with Detective T.J. Powell calling it the most horrific investigation of his career. Sergeant Teresa Gomez shared a touching statement, "Jailyn, you will never be forgotten." She noted the tragic irony that a mother should want the best for her child, yet Jailyn's mother placed her desire for a vacation above her daughter's life. According to the official autopsy report, Jailyn's cause of death was determined to be homicidal violence, with the primary factors being severe dehydration, malnutrition, and neglect. The report revealed that Jailyn was severely underweight for her age, and her body showed signs of prolonged exposure to extreme conditions of thirst and hunger. Tragically, the toddler had not been fed for an extended period, and the lack of fluids led to her body shutting down. The report confirmed that her death was both preventable and the result of extreme neglect by her mother. Jailyn's story is one of unimaginable suffering, a heartbreaking example of what can happen when neglect overtakes duty. In sentencing Kristel Candelario, Judge Sheehan made it clear that Jailyn's short life mattered and that her tragic end would not be in vain. "Jailyn's suffering will not be forgotten," he said, echoing the sentiments of a community in mourning. If you found this story impactful, please consider subscribing to our channel. We share stories to keep the memories of victims like Jailyn alive, to ensure that we learn from these tragedies, and to remind everyone of the importance of compassion, care, and community. Rest in peace, Jailyn.